I often describe to my clients that I'm 49% devil, 51% angel. And there's something in that they've often found a real relief. It's like, wow, this person is really forthcoming with their dark side. And they're not hiding it from me. And that makes me feel safe. As an energy worker, I wasn't assuming. My experience as an energy worker was that those are values. Those are your values, are they not?
Very much, yes.
They are. And the reason I was right is because I wasn't guessing. I was literally reading your energy. I was like going in the shelf of your being and seeing and feeling the values and reading. That's why they were right. But as a coach, most coaches wouldn't be able to read energy in that level of detail.
What enables you to do that?
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
I'm sure most of you will agree that coaching is a very soft science and art. We can't always measure or know why an intervention actually helps. I am a quite scientifically minded person, and yet I've also become more spiritual over the years. So with today's guest, Todd Roache from the UK, I was quite excited to explore his energy work as a practice. We discuss what he's doing. I'm sort of trying to translate that a bit into psychology language. And then we also run a small demo. We also talk about working on our own issue, our shadow as a coach. Because right before we went on record, Todd actually had shared with me that he had a very rough and dark night. So we become quite open and vulnerable right from the start. Let's go.
So straight away, I'm at a crossroads in my mind. Am I giving the raw, unfiltered truth, or am I tidying up for? So I'll just lay it out. So basically, I think the work of being a practitioner and being a human being is one of facing yourself, actually. I mean, how do we support other people in being with themselves? And the kind of clients I work with, it is around inner world journeys, spiritual journeys, existential journeys, dark night of the soul stuff. It's very much that kind of transformational, spiritual, existential work more than it is performance. So those are the waters that I journey with other people in, and those are the waters that I journey with myself in. And last night, I don't even know where it came from, but out of a seemingly very gentle day, by dinner time, I was like, I literally feel like my heart is being stabbed with knives. And what I noticed is that at that point, I could have just had some kind of sedating chocolate and covered up with a Netflix. But in all honesty, I realized that I've been doing that a bit too much recently. It was like there was something inside of me that had been doing that on the sleeve of my heart, was saying, you're going to have to listen to this and face this. And I just thought, okay, I can't cover this one up. So to be fair, it was calling me. I could have repressed it, but I invited it in. I took myself to my quiet room that I'm in now, and I just put on some music, read some poetry, and just let the storm come, feel it, feel it, feel it, feel it, feel it, feel it. And then till the tears started to come, and it just feels like peeling the onion of your soul, and there's just something black and caked to the bottom, tears you haven't cried, whether that's from past lives, depending what your belief system is, but just something at the core of your being that is the next layer of work that is crying out to be worked on, the next layer of pain that's wanting to be felt, the next layer of transmutation. So I was just at that level, just feeling it and feeling it, feeling it. And then my missus came in and said if I was right, and her presence and space holding, because she's a practitioner, took it to the next level. And then I was literally on my hands and knees, just howling, just really working with actually my relationship with suffering and identity. And it was just went from fits of crying and real pain to hysterical, what I call cosmic laughter, as something kind of became realized and unbound. So, oh my God, I can't believe that this part of me was identifying itself with suffering, like it needed to suffer in order to know who it was. And it just made me reflect on how so many times we can become the victim or the sufferer, drama triangle style, or just any situation. I'm the one that always does the washing up. I'm the one that always takes the bins out, and we position ourselves as the sufferer, and that's the badge we wear. This was that, but on a much deeper, darker level, whereas like suffering in really, in my belief system, past life, traumatic, torturous ways, but I'd still cling to suffering as some kind of North Star. And somehow in this this motion of really going into myself, that dissolved. And yeah, it was beautiful, but very painful. And I woke up again in the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and just being in the darkness just triggered this almost panic and more floods of tears and more feelings. And then woke up this morning thinking, okay, something has been kind of birthed through me, something has been healed, something has been revealed. And now I'm staggering into the day, or gently walking into the day, tender and raw, like I've been in the emotional battlefields, which it has kind of been my life for a couple of years now, and the life of lots of people I know. So that's how I'm arriving, and I'm arriving also really happy to be talking about this, because I think we show up to our work, we show up to a practice with our game face on, and there's lots behind the scenes that we're doing to even have a face that can be game-like at all, to have a heart, to have empathy, to have intuition, to have any of those things. And I noticed that for myself anyway, there's lots of scenarios I might turn up in where people aren't comfortable to share that about themselves. So I'm on the ICF board. I'll often turn up to meetings. How are you doing? Everyone will go, oh, I'm fine. I'll be like, I feel like a half-drowned kitten. Just got kicked around a football field. And then everyone else goes, oh, we're being honest, are we? Oh, in which case I feel totally awful as well. So I think there's just something humanizing and normalizing about being able to lay it out. Yeah, got my ass kicked by my own heart and past last night, and I'm happy to be here talking about it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Can you describe a bit more this relationship to suffering that you mentioned? You say, okay, you face it. You also bring it into this conversation, also into your work as a practitioner. How did that evolve for yourself?
Well, that relationship with suffering wasn't even one I realized I had until last night. So it's not something that I can speak about in terms of generality with my work. Having said that, I suppose perhaps there's and I really don't know what's about to come out of my mouth, so let's find out. There's a kind of background awareness in it. I say spiritual interest, but maybe more of like a Zen interest in how we create our own suffering needlessly in the mind. And perhaps that does come into my work, because as coaches, we might have a lens on what is the story that this person is telling themselves that might be creating suffering in this scenario, or what are the filters that they're coming at with this? What's the position they're holding here that might be creating more suffering than is, inverted commas, necessary? But at the same time, because of the kind of clients I work with, they're very into doing the work. So they're the kind of people that will head towards the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, I was coming from maybe this notion that I guess comes from Buddhist philosophy, that you need to choose your problems and choose them in a way to avoid suffering, or maybe even choose your suffering. And in that, I choose the suffering I want to, also lies this notion of acceptance. And that comes actually with ownership and a strength in a way.
Well, I mean, if you really want to go into the Buddha stuff, the way I feel about it is that it all comes back to a me. Like, if there's a me at the center, then suffering can begin. Like, if you're having the experience and you're just having the experience, then there's just a neutral experience. But if you make the experience about you, oh my God, this is my suffering, or this is my experience, or this is my problem, or this is my success, or this is my trophy to lose, then suddenly there's something at risk. The ivory tower of the ego is at risk. And I think that so much suffering comes from orientating everything to the me. Even as a coach, the more we grip around the me castle, our own empire, and make it about ourselves, the flimsier ground I feel we're on. It becomes harder to receive feedback. It becomes harder to open our hearts. It can be harder even to learn, because we're less willing to take risks, because there's this almost statue of meanness that we built at the core of our identity that we're then having to sustain or defend and so on.
Let's take a step back and get to know Todd on a more tangible level. So you prefer to call yourself a practitioner rather than a coach or trainer. And you also work with practitioners, artists, and leaders. What challenge do you usually help them with?
There's a little phrase that I've had banging around my mind for a while, and it's essentially know thyself, grow thyself. And I'm trying to find the third rhyme that somehow goes with flow, but it doesn't quite work. So most of these people are on a mission to live in the world in a way that's unencumbered. And they're aware that often they're the ones in their own way. So a lot of them, almost all of them, happen to be powerful women. And they refer their friends to me and always refer to their friends as powerful women. I've got a powerful woman friend, so-and-so. They're powerhouse. Like, I mean, these people come to me and they're like, I wrote a LinkedIn post yesterday. It went viral. I got 500,000 likes. And there I am with my little, like, 10 likes maximum, thinking, wow, we're doing very different things in the world. You're really out there on the front stage of it, just absolutely kicking ass in your field. But something in your being is struggling, holding up the mission. It's kind of that place where their own stuff starts to challenge the mission they're trying to bring into the world. So that might be, for example, somebody who's an entrepreneur, or somebody who's a leader and they're leading their own business, or somebody who's a practitioner and they're just trying to deliver great work. It's like, what's that sweet spot between personal freedom and excellent work? And where are the challenges where the work distorts or shrinks or contracts because our own stuff starts interfering with it and grabbing its heels and pulling it into the mud? Some of the clients I like working with the most, growing all of the time, and they have sessions every month and have for years because they're always growing and always peeling the onion of their being, learning and experiencing so much that they need sessions to keep them fresh and metabolize everything that's been going on before. There's no like, oh, I've grown, now I'm done. They're just going and going and going. And the only reason we've managed to stay together as a partnership is that I'm growing and growing and growing.
It makes a lot of sense. And how does this journey usually start? Like, what triggers or prompts them to find you?
Great question. Normally, something quite heavy. So I've noticed that most people don't come, even though the offer's there, you don't have to be on your knees to have sessions with me. You can come and work from things going great to even better. People tend to find me when the shit's hit the fan, when something becomes unbearable. And that's kind of why I mentioned the dark night of the soul earlier. So that can be where maybe some kind of personal trauma just makes work too hard, where the interference of their own stuff becomes at a volume that it just becomes unpalatable, and they're really not feeling great at all, or they're feeling like they're threatened in their ability to just keep going, actually. Sometimes to the point they might feel they're losing their way, or sometimes they start a new business and they haven't found the way. So they're lost or suffering or having some kind of existential, spiritual awakening or meltdown that's leaving them extremely confused about what the hell is reality. Something's gone awry, let's say. And just a caveat, I'm talking about my private practice. I also do well-being coaching in organizations and other things that's a lot more, kind of corporate landscape, a little more, inverted commas, vanilla, a little less deep and heavy. In my private practice, that tends to be the case.
Yeah. I would suggest let's maybe unpack both of these parts later, but first let's learn a bit how did these grow over time organically. And for that, I'd love to do a picture icebreaker exercise that I've mentioned earlier. And now there's a small question. Which image describes your becoming as a coach?
Which image describes my becoming as a coach? So would I like to pick this card? Yes.
Oh, nice. So what is it that you see here? Can you describe the image?
Well, this image is actually bringing back a very specific memory that is extremely relevant to my becoming a coach. So this picture kind of looks a little menacing. You've got this face that has neon colors on it, slightly tribal, perhaps slightly war painty, but just neon colors of fluorescent pink and yellows and also blacks and kind of whites. But the lips are black, the eyes are black. You can't see the eyes at all. They're just totally blacked out. And then the background is black with some kind of shadowy murkiness, dappled light on the left-hand side. So there's this very striking face that's sort of impersonal in its dark eyes, but yet lit up with the fluorescent light, surrounded by this darkness.
What do you see there for you?
I just feel relief. I feel relief about kind of what I was saying before about the light and dark of all things, and the room that gives me and my being to be okay with the dark in all that can mean. I don't even mean good or bad, and the light. And it brings to mind that memory, and perhaps something that my clients value about the way I work with them, and perhaps something I've needed from the work myself.
Yeah, you noticed resistance when you selected it, and that's why you went for it. Where do you think that resistance came from?
Yeah, where was that resistance? I feel like I just see myself in that photo. I don't feel resistance in this moment. I'm now more in relief and joy. But initially there was just something I felt like I was looking at myself. And, you know, it kind of reminds me, again, having us contracted in total transparent honesty as a way of working today. I often describe to my clients that I'm 49% devil, 51% angel. And there's something in that they've often found a real relief. It's like, wow, this person is really forthcoming with their shadow side or the dark side. They're not hiding it from me. In fact, they're telling me right to my face. And that makes me feel safe because I don't have to worry that it's going to come unexpectedly into the space and bite me out of nowhere. And again, I've got these amazing stories coming to mind from certain clients that they've been able to tell me things that literally they've then said, I had therapy for 10 years and no one could hold that as non-judgmentally as you did and as unconditionally lovingly. And I've healed more in that 60 minutes than I have in 10 years of therapy, simply because there was something so unconditionally loving. But equally, what they told me was extremely, for a lot of people, very shocking and dark. And I could see why they wouldn't have been able to hold it. That picture reminds me of that journey I've been on in myself, to hold that range, I suppose, between real, like, beautiful, beautiful love and that comfort with the darkness.
And how did you develop that capacity of balancing love and darkness yourself? How did you evolve to be the practitioner that you are today?
Yeah. Well, let me just take a moment to sink into that. To a large part, I'm aware of this darkness. I knew there was some dark for sure, but I didn't know the degree. And frankly, Toby, it just came hammering on the door. I remember being with my partner in the house I'm in now, and this is where I'll leave you to edit or not edit where I go in this conversation. Her work is, or was at the time, sexual alchemy. And it was kind of through that world that I met several people that made it possible for me to open doors in myself. What was behind those doors, though, was much more shocking than I expected. And to go back to what I was saying, I remember being with my partner and just howling in fear and terror. It was like I laid out the picnic blanket and everything was nice and sweet. And then these eerie dark spiders would crawl out of my being and back onto the picnic blanket and be like, I just can't cut it out of me. And I to be honest, at times I thought the only way to get rid of this darkness in me is to kill myself. Not that I was serious about that, but it just felt there was no way out of it. The only way out of it was in. The only way out of it was to love it. For whatever reason, the universe has just said, this is your little garden of being or personality or soul, however you want to say it, to take care of and cultivate. And for whatever reason, your little garden has got a lot of darkness and rocks in it. And your little job as a human is to love it as it is. So I just thought, if I don't love myself and love what's in me, I'm going to go mad. I can't live in such strong self-denial and fear, just downright fear of me, of what was in me. So that process just took so much meditation and time in the woods and being with myself and just relaxing into what was inside me till it just revealed itself as presence, actually. Like, there was the possibility of violence, but I was never violent. There was the possibility of all kinds of things, but at the core of it, it was just energy. It was just divinity. It was just energy that was just simmering away. The more I sat with it, the more my presence grew, the more my heart grew, and the more I could sort of be a space in which that could be held, I could say. So it grew my being so that I could be a big enough container where I could hold those kind of energies and any ambiguities or fears I might have had about them. and also therefore hold them in other people. So when other people came to me, I wasn't judging them. Who am I to judge? Like, there's so much in here that I had to learn to love. And I suppose it reminds me about a lot of the work of Carl Jung around, we can't really say we're unjudgmental to other people until we've stopped judging ourselves. We can't really be comfortable in our own skin until we've faced all those inner demons. So it was a lot of inner demon work for many years. I did have this quest to know myself, and I did want to lift up every rock, as I say, and see what was under it. But I wasn't expecting it to be so horrific.
That's great. I'm trying to maybe zoom in a bit on the key elements there with what you just shared, this journey of befriending your inner demon and maybe self-acceptance to
Yeah.
What were your key moments or key experiences that really made a difference for you in this journey, that unlocked the next level
Of acceptance.
self-acceptance?
Just coming off the top of my head, time, surrender. And I remember reading a book called, I think it was called Own Your Shadow. Oh, it's this book, Owning Your Own Shadow, Understanding the Dark Side of the Psyche. And I remember reading this on the plane. This would have been about 10 years ago. And thinking a lot of it didn't apply to me, but there was a particular word in there that really struck, and it was paradox. And it was the willingness and the ability to hold a state of zero-ness in a way. Like, if I made myself, or if I chose right or wrong or good or bad, then I would instantly become a villain. So I had to hover in the paradox, in the no man's land between, this space of not choosing in a way, of not labeling. And in a way, I think, tying to what we said earlier about Zen and those kind of philosophies, not that I claim to be an expert, but just not labeling. I ceased to label or pick a side within my own soul. The stubborn hunger for truth, the truth of your true nature, even if it's horrific. And something in that's like, I've always somehow thought it doesn't really matter what it is if it's ultimately true. There's something about truth, and I kind of mean that in a almost existential spiritual sense, this idea that perhaps our true nature isn't me as Todd, the person sat in front of you. It's as life itself. It's that kind of philosophy of oneness, something in true nature that knew that at some level beyond this seeming dark person or the seeming light person, and maybe wasn't even this person at all. I was actually life itself appearing as a person. And this was just a temporary form. And there's something about that became a kind of candle that whispering to me and saying, there's something more here, let's say, that is another way of being, a transpersonal way of being, is the true answer.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to translate it a bit into tangible and maybe also repeatable practice. So what I hear is you read this book about shadow work, facing your own shadow, and that got you to this skill of doing less labeling, both on yourself, and that came also with less labeling, less judging for others. And that then enabled you to become this practitioner, to hold a space that is not judgmental, where people can open up and bring also their own shadow.
Yeah. Beautifully summarized. You should be a coach.
Thank you. Yeah, also doing my fair share of work in many of these directions, coming more from a scientific, tangible viewpoint oftentimes. So I find it super interesting, actually. And I think it's important to establish that you are a serious guy at a reputable coaching school. But I think what is possibly more interesting for me, and maybe also for some listeners, is the part that we discussed in the beginning, the coaching, darkness, energy work. And I would love to unpack that a bit with language. You said earlier you don't want to help people doing this sort of performance-based coaching, but you do. And I think that's something I picked up when I was watching you on another interview. You don't do below shifts of being.
Oh, is that what I said?
That's what you said, yeah. So I'm wondering, what do you consider a shift of being?
I need to go a bit deeper to find that. So, and I'll speak through my belief system and the belief system and the experience of some of the people I work with. And what comes to mind is a quote from a client who came on a retreat, and their words were, "The work we did really opened my eyes and my soul." Nothing was added in. I didn't add in to their eyes or their soul. The work we did opened their eyes and the soul. So to me, it's like there's layers of human conditioning, like habits or beliefs about myself. I'm this or I'm that, or patterns in the way we've existed that might mask a deeper truth about who we are at a more fundamental level. Example, a young girl is ridiculed for being boyish and loud and a natural leader and asked to be more quiet and all of the things that we might imagine happen. So she creates this persona and exists in the world as that. But as she gets older, she realizes, no, this is not me. There's something in me that is stubborn and powerful and an alpha, and I'm a leader, and I'm just not going to play this effing role that is just some outdated princess thing I had to do to keep my parents happy because my brothers were the one that were going to do all the leadership stuff, for example. So something true in her was covered up by society and growing up and conditioning and maybe fear of not belonging, whatever it was. So perhaps shift in being isn't as true as a revelation of the being that was there all along. But it can appear as a shift in being because the person suddenly seems to become a different person. So you could say it's a shift in a way of being, but as I would feel it now, it's perhaps more a revelation or a liberation of who they already were all along at a more core level that just feels true in an unfiltered way, like almost a primal way. This is who I am without thinking about who I am. This is what I am without considering if it's right or wrong. It's just who I am. So going back to that quote, the work we did opened my eyes and my soul. It's those eyes opening to the nature of the person as they actually have been all along at those deeper levels, or the soul opening, however you want to think about that, to something that was kind of always there, but just layered up, caked up with all the things we've been talking about.
And if I were to try translating it into conventional psychology language, it's like working on beliefs that were maybe established during childhood. Okay, you are the girl, there's your brothers, and you are the quote-unquote little princess, and kind of breaking up with these beliefs and replacing them with more authentic ones in a way.
And I would, through my lenses of things, and we can play the lens game back and forth, I always wonder about, increasingly with the clients I work with, beliefs being replaced with other beliefs. And at the rawest level, it's beliefs being replaced with no beliefs. Like an animal, a fox, doesn't have to believe it's a fox to be a fox. It's just a fox. An eagle doesn't have to believe I'm an eagle. It has no self-referencing belief or mindset. So there's something about the level beyond that where you're not thinking, oh, I'm not this, I'm that, I'm going to stick a new label on it. It's that non-labeled place where you just are that thing. That's why I said you just direct. It's more of a direct experience without any labeling in the mind necessarily, which can take quite a jump for people because there's this has to be, or in my experience anyway, a willingness to live without holding back. I can't be like this with you if I'm calculating who I'm being while I'm being it. It's like, well, now I have to kind of dance to the puppet master of my own self-concept and beliefs. I'd rather just not have anything and just come at you like a gust of wind.
Yeah, I love that. How I rationalized it for myself actually is like we get trained, especially when we work with self-awareness, we get trained a lot looking at ourselves through the eyes of a third person, which I think on the one hand is helpful with this like letting go of ego or realizing there's these different personas. And at the same time, I think it also made me in the past self-conscious of how do other people see me. So then try to let go of that skill again and live my life through the first person's eye. Living more within myself and just being instead of thinking about these labels and beliefs and is that a useful belief or is it rather that one? And rather go with that empty.
Yeah. When I was a trainer at Animas, we do the paradigms module and that whole idea that none of us are seeing the same reality. We have our own model of the world built up of our own constellation of beliefs and values and assumptions and so on. So we look out at the world through that and we create our own filters and therefore own slightly colored version of existence. I look at you, I see through my beliefs of what a blonde-haired person with glasses who's younger than me and wears a jumper and has a piano in the background, who that is based on my past, potentially. So we know we're all carrying those filters into life. The more I trained in Animas and the more I went on this journey for myself, the more I realized everyone in this room is making up a version of Todd. They're looking at me and just creating a Todd, like their own version of Todd. There is no one ultimate definitive version of Todd. And I don't even need to carry around my own version because everyone's going to make up their own version anyway. So to your point around emptiness, it just reminds me of like, I'm off the hook. There's no point in me curating a version of Todd because you're just going to make one up, good or bad, or whatever kind for yourself. So you do you and your personal paradigm. And I think I'll shift my relationship with personal paradigms altogether.
Yeah. And as we're here, let's maybe also connect that now with energy work, prompting you with something that I've picked up and I found super useful. And that is this idea. It's from a book called The Untethered Soul.
Yeah.
Which I found, very, very applicable than other books that I've read before in that direction. And it was one metaphor that stuck with me, which is this idea of riding on a train or on a car and watching trees just pass by. And you see them, they pass through you, and then you let go of them. They are not further part of your concerns. And that's in a way where you want to go with life also and other things, letting life happen and pass through you without clinging to it and without worrying. How does that reflect your understanding of energy work?
Yeah, great question. From my experience and perspective, I'd like to offer a difference between energy work and awareness. Yeah. So to me, The Untethered Soul, having read it and similar books, is about awareness. Not even necessarily energy work, just the raw awareness that is life itself. That idea of you're going along the train, you're not accumulating stuff behind you. You're not accumulating all of those trees that you've passed and then looking out into the world through the journey that's behind you. You're fresh in every second. There's just this freshness to your presence. It's an unlayered freshness. And there's terms like awakened and enlightened, for example, where you're just experiencing a very clean way of being. Does that make sense as a kind of field of awareness? I mean, I could say a lot more on that.
Yeah.
So Eckhart Tolle, great example. I think we've all heard of him, or a lot of listeners, I'm guessing, have. He's all about the power of now, and he's basically had that experience where his personal identity just got sucked down the plug hole of a deep, dark depression and essentially evaporated, and that all that's left there is a much clearer way of being, where there isn't everything I was talking about before. He's just experiencing the world, new in every moment to some degree. Obviously, he can remember his own name and where the door handle is, but there's not that kind of accumulation of identity. There's a different way of existing in the world. So, for example, Eckhart Tolle could sit down with somebody and be very present and very in the moment, but that would be different to him then tuning into somebody, sensing that they have some trauma in their left shoulder and helping that trauma or contraction move out of their shoulder through energy work, or channeling an archangel, or doing Reiki, or doing anything that is that. So to me, there's a field of awareness in which, and consciousness in which life is taking place, and that's the interest of things like Zen and Eckhart Tolle and the Untethered Soul. And then energy work is more a manipulation of energy itself within the wider field of awareness. So I'm interested in awareness and presence, and have gone through, to a large degree, my own awakening journey that's been totally horrific for the last couple of years, of really letting go of so much of who I think I am. Very separate, but they help each other to the journey of being able to read people's energy, feel their feelings, tap into their past lives, and lots of, inverted commas, depending what your belief system is, crazy or awesome stuff besides. So that's how I see awareness and energy work. So
yeah,
what are you hearing in that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, how do you get that now into actual practice. And because on a rational level, I also like these concepts make sense to me. And this notion, okay, not clinging to that identity, letting things pass through me, that is useful and makes sense. And yet then, I'm awake at night and I don't know, I have these thoughts and I can't seem to let go and let them pass through. And so how would you approach that now if we say you are having an energy work session now, or that seems useful here?
So here we're going well off the coaching track, and you're up for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that isn't exactly the kind of things I would help people with, what you've just said. There's a great author called Adyashanti who talks about Velcro, like a Velcro thought. And in my experience, if you're thinking something, you can't let it go. It's because it's sticking to something else inside you that makes it a concern for you for some reason. Like, for example, if I'm really concerned about, am I going to do this training right? And I've invested my ego as a trainer, it's a lot easier for that thought to stick inside me to my idea of myself as a trainer. Whereas if I have no idea of myself as a trainer, then there's nothing for that thought to stick to. It can just float downstream. You see what I mean?
It would be useful to let go of that identity because then I don't need to worry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then it's just a thought. It's just a leaf in a river floating downstream that doesn't have necessarily anything to do with you. There's no reason for your mind to grab the thought and wrestle with the thought and interact with it, get stuck in it, because it's not relevant to you unless you identify in some way with the content of the thought. So the less personal identification you have as anything, the more transparent you become and the less you can get attached to, because you've just let go that you're any of it. That you're a trainer, that you're a man, that you're a guitar, that you're something, ultimately, that you're just life appearing as a Todd or as a Tobi. And all of those layers of conditions we spoke about when we're talking about opening the soul and opening the eyes, they've somehow been resolved. They've somehow been released, which is why I was up last night crying. Because something in there had still to go. As much as I like, or my ego might like to think, I'm an awakened being, all glorious, all knowing. There's clearly still bits of conditioning in me, although a lot less than there was, and less than a lot of people, that have yet to be seen, actually, is how it feels to me, is be seen and be realized, which is why oftentimes in those experiences like last night, there's so much laughter. When the thing is seen, when the illusion is seen, it's like, I never believed that was me, becomes this hilarious joke. So it becomes a transparency of being. And actually the transparency of being is something I'm increasingly finding super helpful in coaching, in any kind of session.
Yeah. And let's explore that bit of what do you do to be able to do that later. But first I would like to go back to this example, because you said, when I came with this example of I can't let go of these thoughts and that holds me back from sleeping at night, we unpacked that a bit with the identity thing. And you said we're going way off coaching now. What do you mean by that? If I come to you as a client with that sort of problem, would you say, okay, let's do coaching or let's do energy work? Like how
I see.
How would you approach it?
I suppose I just had some ideas of what you might want to be talking about in this podcast about becoming a coach. So I meant in that respect, I didn't even necessarily mean talking about it in coaching. In a coaching context, I think it is possible to coach around what you've just said. I haven't done a lot of it, to be honest. But if it was you, I would have said to you, you said to me, I can't let go of these thoughts. I would have said to you, who is the one holding the thought? And then explored that and tracked you back into that. And then what about that thought is worth holding? And just helped you explore who is the holder and what is going on there. You just zoomed in that coaching lens to start you reflecting on that potentially.
Yeah. So I could be saying, let's say it's this thought of, okay, how do I approach this podcast recording? How should we shape the episodes? And then you're saying it's this identity, or I'm not sure, you're asking, and I am saying, okay, there's this identity of, wanting to be the podcast host, entrepreneur, leader, whatever. And it's that sort of identity that has that thought, and realizing that is already kind of enables me already to step out of the thought stream, because it can now flow onward, because I'm aware, okay, it's just this persona inside me that is having that.
Are you saying that it would in theory, or are you saying that it already has just by talking about it?
Maybe, at least it's a super helpful image to kind of step out of the stream and be aware that this like is this persona.
If you want, we can try and have more of a conversation around it, but we can have a little mini coaching conversation about it. We can try. If you think
Okay.
there's more to explore.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have my issue straight, but yeah, let's try. Let's do it as an experiment.
So to give us a starting place, what I heard you say was that last night you were having a lot of thoughts, that as much as you know about letting go of thoughts in theory, somehow these thoughts weren't able to be let go of. Is that a recap that holds?
Yeah, and I think it's oftentimes that I'm not even particularly worrying about things. It's just I'm awake, like thoughts, I don't know, thinking about work, thinking about how to approach things, thinking about a message that I was going to write but then forget to write. And none of them is particularly urgent or scary, but it keeps me awake, basically, even though it's quote unquote not a big deal. And yeah, I've tried to approach that with, let's say, mindfulness, doing body scans. Maybe another strategy is writing things down to say, okay, they're now on my little notepad here and I can let it go. And that sometimes works, but often enough it doesn't.
So you're saying these thoughts are consuming more of your attention and you're less able to let them go than you'd like?
Yeah, and they are holding me back from sleep. So with the result being that I'm less rested in the morning and in the next day.
Mind if we just sit with that for a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to go coaching or coaching/energy work here?
Feel free to bring in the energy work.
I start to sit with you in this. I start to feel a little bit of fear and a little bit of tension in my solar plexus. I don't like failing. And I start to, if I really go into that, I feel my legs a little wobbly. I value excellence and I value clarity. And if I really go into that, I start crying. And the last thing I want to do is disappoint people. Actually, I have a real value about being there for people. And I don't want to let people down. And I don't want to let my standards down. And that's important to me. And that's me just tapping into something I'm feeling you. And I'd pass that back and see what that brings up for you. What do you recognize? What feels relevant?
Wow. Yeah, feels very, very accurate. And there's this, yeah, I feel a bit of resistance in hearing these quote unquote assumptions. But at the same time, yeah, it's a very accurate analysis. And hearing you point out certain areas of your body also makes me aware of my own, which is useful.
Yeah, and then to clarify, when you hear it like that, it can sound, well, obviously that's why I said, do you want to go coaching or energy work? It's very not coachy, is it? I mean, the coaching session, the ICF would be fail, fail, fail. And it can sound like me telling you, but if we had more time, I'd have framed it like, I'm basically going to tune into you and pick up as if I was you. I'm feeling this as if I was you. And then I would offer it, not asserting it as truth, but as data for you to look at and go, so I'm being like being an antenna, offering myself as an antenna for you, because I think sometimes it's a different way of mirroring for somebody. They can go, wow, yeah, those things are true. They are accurate. And that helps me notice what is here actually and start to get some traction on it. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking, okay, what I took from you was these values, maybe in a way of, okay, this need to be useful in a way that stuck with me now. And I'm wondering, what can I do with that now? Like with that realization, okay, that is in a way what is behind. That is what's keeping me up, worrying about work in a way. And now what?
So then we could, we've dipped into a little bit of energy work. If that was a proper energy work session, I'd probably been more accurate and gone deeper. But then we could be talking about, okay, well, what is the value that you feel is really sticking here or resonating?
Yeah, maybe it's this notion of, what's behind that need to be useful? Like, what if I wasn't? What would I lose? What would it do? And I think that brings me back to this conversation we had about identity, because it is in a way also that identity that I'm clinging to. I am a person who is useful. And I guess there's potential of being even more useful by not trying so hard to be useful. Which again, then, you need to watch out, like, do I try to not be useful in order to be more useful? Or, like I have to catch myself going in these stairs of meta levels. But I think that's interesting.
So watching you thinking and feeling, it seems like you're figuring something out. What would you say that was?
Yeah. I think looking at the problem through this identity lens in a way, I think that is a finding here. I could say, okay, that is again beliefs. I have to be useful, or I have to be competent, whatever. That is at play here.
What do you want to do with that realization?
Now looking at this in daylight, it seems useful on a cognitive level. I'm wondering what I can do with it when I'm unable to sleep. And yeah, if that mental image of stepping back and acknowledging, okay, it's just this identity, if that is, that's certainly something I can try. It's worth the experiment or worth the reminder.
I feel like there's something in this that is potentially fearful, because to lose an identity is scary. The mind is thinking and racing for a reason. It's trying to protect something like that identity. That's important to you, for example. So I think threats to identity are potentially, threatening. So I'd try and really create a space that just allowed us to drop a little deeper. And sometimes energetically, that can just almost be an invitation in the silence that allows you to drop into your body and start feeling a little more, where is this in me? And maybe exploring any assumptions that this identity needs to not be there. Is it? You see what I mean? But I imagine the way we could explore it would be spacious, slow, and just to be honest, maybe letting you squirm in it a bit. Squirm in that there's something here. I'm not sure if I want it to be here, but it's here. I don't know what to do with it. It's like, yeah, what's that? Why this squirmy?
And that again has this notion of acceptance in a way, or letting things be, and by that becoming okay with it. And in that sense, stepping out of it now, what I was trying to find out is also, what is the difference between energy work and coaching?
Yeah.
And what I experienced now is that energy work, if that's what it was, could also very well be a quote unquote tool in coaching. Like where we are in a coaching session, we are in a coaching setting, and then you use this sort of bodily mirroring, reflecting, making an offer maybe as a tool in a coaching session.
I mean, energy work wise, there's a lot. Well, for starters, energy work can be a lot of things. The kind of energy work I do, what I was doing then, which was inverted commas reading you, is just one of the many things I could do in an energy work session, and a brief toe in the water of it. But I agree that in the coaching session, that's something that we can, as coaches, if it's offered, because I didn't really offer it exactly. I was more in energy worker mode. In coach mode, I might have said, I'm noticing in my body almost this kind of fear and tightness in my solar plexus, and like something's at risk here. I'm not sure if there's anything that resonates for you. I'm just offering that for you. Like you say, it's just, you're not saying it's fact. It's just you're using your body as an antenna to pick up a feeling as data in the space. You're not asserting its truth. Like I said it more plainly than that. As a coach, I might have just phrased it differently and then offered it in for consideration. It might land, it might not land. As a coach, I probably wouldn't have said the things on values, me reading your values. As an energy worker, I wasn't assuming. My experience as an energy worker was that those are values. Those are your values, are they not?
Very much, yes.
They are. And the reason I was right is because I wasn't guessing. I was literally reading your energy. I was like going in the shelf of your being and seeing and feeling the values and reading. That's why they were right. But as a coach, most coaches wouldn't be able to read energy in that level of detail. They might be able to pick up fear or tightness, but I doubt they'd be able to pick up people's values. So there's some of that I think can be used in quote unquote pure coaching, if that's what you mean.
And if we let go now of like these labels, energy work versus coaching, and not make it a versus, but I'm wondering what enables you to do that? What are the underlying capacities that you have there?
Yeah. That enables me to read your system and read your values and your feelings. I'm curious, just because I've never asked them this, what do you imagine it is? If you think about it, how could it be possible?
Listening. And listening a lot. And and then I'm not even sure how much of an aware process that is for you, but I guess you picked up many clues in our interactions so far. And then being in the moment when I was sharing my issue, kind of putting the pieces together and having a strong body awareness. That is something that I'm also very aware of seeing that in you, because that's not my natural habitat. And so I would say listening really, like on the one hand with your ears, but also with your eyes and everything, and then being able to then use that to mirror it back to me.
I would say that could lead to that result in terms of how I did it. Like when I felt your values, I wasn't doing a Sherlock Holmes and adding up all the things we talked about. I was literally feeling the quality of them in you. Like energy all has a different quality. Like you can feel the difference between anger and sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't pick up anger.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pick up anger, can you? It's not solid. Is that true?
Yeah.
You can't pick up sadness. So what's it made of? It's made of energy. But yet it's so obvious that it's anger and it's sadness, or it's anger and it's joy. It's so obvious when you feel it in yourself. But not because you're looking at it or picking up and going, it's a cup, it's a pen, no, because you're feeling it. So when you really, really carry on that feeling journey or that sensing journey, the same is true of other energies. Like the value exists in you somewhere because you know it, you can feel it. So it exists in the field of Tobi. So therefore, if I'm really sensitive in the same way that you can feel your own anger or you're aware of your own values, I can be aware of them. But to do that, I have to be extremely transparent. Like, if I'm really loud in here, I couldn't hear you. You see what I mean? I can't hear or feel you if my body is congested with its own feeling. I wouldn't be able to pick up any of that if I was too busy feeling my own stuff. So to do it, I have to be super transparent and still and quiet. But imagine I'm white snow and you're the one walking across the snow of my body and mind and soul and emotions. And then all of those footprints, I can then say, oh, look, these are the footprints you left in my snow. These are the values, these are the beliefs, these are the things. Just by being an absolute blank canvas as much as I can be. But the things I can pick up from people are bonkers compared to what most people think you can pick up. But I think anyone can pick them up, and coaches included, if you just really trust the very fine quality of them. They're not always loud, and you're very still and quiet. You're that snow, or whatever metaphor works for you. Or like you say, you've got that kind of relationship with your body. That's a nice exercise. As somebody told me about the Association of Coaching did a nice exercise. Before you go in the session, you do a self-scan of your body. You get totally aware of what is currently in your body. And then if anything changes, oh, someone's moved something or something feels different in my body, you've got that data. Potentially it's your stuff, potentially it's the client. If you're not sure, you can offer it either way. And if it's not right, it's not right, and that's fine too. But there's ways of cultivating that, I think. And there's just ways of being aware that it's an area in which you can listen. Full body listening, they sometimes call it. I'm just taking that to a more extreme example by just really listening down, I would say more the other things, the values, and that can go further into beliefs, all kinds of things.
And what do you do to cultivate that emptiness, making sure that your snow in a way is settled so that you can really look out for the footprints that the client leaves in that snow?
Yeah. What I do now versus what I did might be different, but maybe I can give a few kind of pointers based on some assumptions of where people are. Is that a useful way to go?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Well, if you imagine, if you rush into a session with 1 minute to go, you've got all of this stuff churning in you. Oh my God, it's busy. I can't believe I've got a session now. Oh, I've got to do this. You're a snowstorm. You're not still snow. How are you going to hear the client and feel the client if you've got all of that moving around you? So for some people, it's about creating space before a session, whatever their ritual is, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Some people like to just breathe, be still, literally let the snow or the dust settle, whatever metaphor we want to use. Sometimes people think about the muddy water in a pond, letting that go to the bottom so the water's clear. But sometimes it's just awareness. Wow, my pond is not at all clear. It's a snowstorm. I need to create some time to let this settle. So my secret sauce is space. I give myself so much space as a practitioner. Like some of my friends, they do like 8 sessions a day. I mean, when I do wellbeing coaching, I do quite a lot of sessions, but generally in my life, I need a lot of space. People, especially in energy work sessions, literally pay me to be able to tune in to not only them, but I can also tune into anything with a frequency that isn't even in the room, like their friends or their book or anything. And with such detail without being told, all kinds of things. I mean, very, very specific things that you just wouldn't guess. Like I had a client recently and it's like, why do I keep seeing a black panther? Because just before the session, I brought in my power animal. It's a black panther. Okay. And so I'm like, there's no guessing that. I could have said anything, a duck, a glove, just very specific things that are just absolutely the one exact thing that it was. But again, that just takes that real stillness and that real transparency. So some time before the session, but maybe for me anyway, space in my life generally, because I'm always doing the inner work on whatever has accumulated in me. So there's just less in me. There's less beliefs, there's less resistance, there's less conditioning, there's just less than there is in a lot of people. And that just takes willingness or interest in doing the inner work, not to make you a better version of yourself, but to be honest, to me, it's about true nature in terms of what we spoke about, becoming the awareness of life and of spirit itself.
Becoming awareness, letting go of resistance and conditioning. With this advice from Todd, we close for today's episode. And if you're somewhat like me, you might react with a bit of skepticism hearing Todd speak about sensing energy and sensing frequencies. And what helps me here is to ask not, is this true from a scientific perspective, but to ask, is this useful when looking at coaching and development? And my experience with Todd's energy and mirroring work, as I would call it, was definitely quite powerful. So if you are curious to work with Todd, he's also doing coach training and mentoring. Find him on LinkedIn or on his website, both linked in our show notes. If you want to hear more about how Todd makes a living from this line of work, just tune in next week when we hear more on the making of Todd Roache. This was a coaching demo edition of The Making of a Coach. I'm Tobi from metaFox. Thanks for your time and support. Bye-bye.